You can use augmented triads like the Beatles for a dominant. You can use augmented triads to create a spooky minor sound. You can use it to be Oscar Peterson cool blues guy. And you can use it to get this weird, spacey minor. Let's dig in and find out all the uses of the augmented triad. The first thing to understand about the augmented triad is what it is. 1, 3, sharp 5. It is the only symmetric triad. We have another symmetric chord, the fully diminished chord, but it's a 4-part harmony. This is the only truly symmetric triad, 3-part harmony. It's all made up of major thirds. So for instance, C, E, and G sharp create an interval pattern that is identical no matter where you set the 1. Meaning if C is 1, E is 3, and G sharp is sharp 5. If E is 1, G sharp is 3, and C is sharp 5. If G sharp is 1, C is 3, and E is sharp 5. So however you invert it creates the same structure. Now since we only have 12 keys, and we know that each augmented triad is actually 3 augmented triads, that means that each triad that I choose covers a fourth of the material, meaning there are only 4 augmented triads. There is C augmented, which is also E and G sharp. There is B augmented, which is also B and D sharp. There is B flat augmented, which is also G flat and D. And there is A augmented, which is also C sharp and F. That's it. When I get to G sharp, I'm already back at C. So to hit the ground running, what you want to do is maybe learn one shape for augmented. Let's just choose this one. I can apply that from any root that's inside that augmented that I find on the low E string. So from G, B, and D sharp. There are lots of fingerings for this, and it's covered in other videos, but not in this one. We're going to talk about application. So let's talk about a situation where I'm using an augmented triad, a G augmented triad, built from G. Meaning I'm not using it as a substitution. I'm actually asking myself, what uses do I have for that G augmented triad? Now, that can function as a dominant chord, meaning if I'm in the key of C and I want to create a G7 sound that leads me back to C, I can use G augmented in its place. And that's by far the most common use for augmented triads. If you hear the Beatles, "Oh Darling," it's like, "Oh Darling," right? That sound for the 5 chord, it gives you the root, 3, and flat 6, not sharp 5. When I say sharp 5, I'm really inferring that there is an augmented triad there. But if it's in place of a dominant chord, it has a 5. I'm just adding a flat 6 to it. So it's a substitution of sorts because it's 2 chord tones and a tension. I get this sound. It can come from harmonic minor. It can come from harmonic major. It can come from melodic minor. Those scales contain augmented triads, but it's just giving you those 3 intervals from whatever mode that you're thinking about. Now, in a 2-5-1, you could just use like D minor to G augmented to C, and it leads really nicely. But another use for it is as a landing spot, meaning as a 1 chord. If you listen to Nat King Cole's version of Stardust, it starts like this. The purple dust of twilight time. That thing? That's a G augmented going to a G, meaning I can do a 2, 5, and then the 1. It's a suspension. It's not a dominant function. That's an actual 1, 3, sharp 5 tonality. So that can come from the 3rd mode of harmonic minor, which is Ionian sharp 5. It can come from the 3rd mode of melodic minor, which is Lydian sharp 5. It can come from the 1st mode of harmonic major, which is called harmonic major. And it can come from the 6th mode of harmonic major, which is called Lydian sharp 2, sharp 5. So these are all the diatonic scales that contain a 1, 3, sharp 5. So that sound, if you want to modernize your progression, let's say you're playing a standard and you have a 2, 5, 1, you can go 2, 5, 1 with a major 7 sharp 5. Ooh, smalls, here I come, right? All right, so that's a sound. Now, let's go to the next way you can use an augmented triad. Now, this requires a level of harmonic knowledge that's a little bit more advanced because we are now using substitutions. If you're only comfortable building chords from the root of the chord, you're going to feel a little bit lost. But the basic idea is now I'm going to take that G augmented triad, but I'm not going to use G as the bass note anymore. I'm going to play A flat as the bass note. So G augmented against that A flat bass note gives me A flat minor major 7. Let's put that in a key that might be a little bit easier to see. Like, let's say we're taking a D minor. All I really have to do is build an augmented triad from its 7th, flatted 3rd, or 5th, right? So if I'm just looking at something that all of you can do is play a power chord and then just learn an augmented shape and apply that augmented shape from that 2nd note in the power chord, right? From the 5th of D. That gives me a minor major 7 sound, right? That could be the 1st mode of melodic minor, the 1st mode of harmonic minor, the 4th mode of harmonic major. Lots of scales have that sound in them. So I'm just going to say it's D melodic minor for shits and giggles, but it doesn't have to be. Now, that could be my 2 chord in a 2, 5, 1, right? I have a... So now I use that C sharp augmented, F augmented, A augmented sound. Now, it can also work really well as a point of resolution in a minor 2-5-1. If I have E minor 7 flat 5, going to A7, going to D minor, but instead of D minor, I'm thinking about a C sharp augmented, or F augmented, same thing, or A augmented, right? That shape that we talked about, I could do that again and again and again. And it's vocabulary over that D minor. If I have a song like So What? If you're like, how do I apply it? Well, think about your pentatonic box, right? I'm giving you the keys to the kingdom by telling you start it from the 5th. So if this is D minor, 5th, in box 1 of D minor pentatonic. So from those points, you can burst into the arpeggio from your pentatonic scale. You can start from the 7th and from the flat 3. The flat 3 is also a part of the pentatonic thing. So if you're playing D minor pentatonic, you have 2 points of entry. That's the way to think about it, maybe. Like if I'm thinking about, let's say, this box 4 pentatonic right here for D minor, and I know the intervals flat 7, 5, so that's an entry point into that augmented sound. 4, flat 3, another entry point, right? So you can think about it that way. But that's how you relate that augmented information to minor chords. All right, let's take a look at the next one. Now, if I take a dominant chord that's not resolving, right? So a Lydian dominant tonality, like the 1 chord in a blues is a good example for that. Let's say I'm playing a blues in G. Now, what I want to do now is C augmented starting from either the 2, the sharp 4, or the flat 7 of that G. Meaning if I'm playing a G blues, I'm using A augmented, C sharp augmented, or F augmented. Right? I have this sound on this root. It's coming from Lydian dominant or whole tone. It's giving me flat 7, 2, sharp 4. Those intervals exist in Lydian dominant, right? Which is 1, 2, 3, sharp 4, 5, 6, flat 7. I'm just taking a little bit of it, but it doesn't have a root, no G in it, right? That sound. Now check this out in the context of blues. Again, think about entry points. So we know it starts from the 2, the flat 7, and the sharp 4. The sharp 4 is the blue note. So every time I just play a G blues scale, ooh, you can do that. You can do this, right? You can be jazzy. Trust me. Okay, now flat 7, also an entry point in minor pentatonic. Here's your flat 7 at G minor pentatonic. That last entry point, the 2, well, that's in major pentatonic. If I go, right, that 9 chord, that's your 2, right here on the B string. Right, I could get that blue note again. The sharp 4, which is also the flat 5. So that's your entry point there. It's a really, really, really nice sound. Another use for that same augmented triad is minor 7 flat 5 chords. Yes, you can use it that way too. Let's say I'm playing a minor 2-5-1, D minor 7 flat 5, G7, going to C minor. Well, I can use that augmented sound from the sharp 4, or the flat 5 really, of a minor 7 flat 5. It's the flat 5, the 2, and the flat 7 of that minor 7 flat 5 chord. So that gives me what's called a Locrian natural 9, which is the 6th mode of melodic minor. It's a really cool sound. So instead of playing, now if you look closely at what I just did there on that minor 7 flat 5 chord on the D minor 7 flat 5, I played this C augmented triad. But as I resolved it to the 5 chord, the G7, I just took that augmented triad down a half step, and it's the correct sound for the G7. But then if I just keep it, it's also the sound for the C minor 7 or C minor major 7, right? So now, in terms of augmented triads, here's my minor 2-5-1. Putting the roots in. The last sound we're going to talk about is augmented a half step up. If I'm trying to play over a G minor, it suspends the sound. I'm using an A flat or G sharp augmented, which is also E augmented or C augmented, and it gives me the 4, the 6, and the flat 2. You hear that? So it's a cool sound. What it really comes from is Dorian flat 9 or Phrygian natural 6, which are different ways of calling the 2nd mode of melodic minor. So in Wayne Shorter's music, you hear quite a lot of that. So you can use that for vamping on a minor chord. That's one pretty common thing you can do. Like it's just a G minor funk thing, just to make it a little bit more spicy out. Like a sidestep from Dorian into that territory. Or you can use it in the context of moving harmony. Like if you do it on 2-5-1, it creates a situation where you're using the same augmented triad on the 2 and the 5, right? Here's D minor 7, but instead of that, I'm going to put that B augmented on it. G in the roots, same upper structure, and then the resolution. So it's very dissonant for that D minor. But it's not bad, it's a cool sound. Now, here is a really cool thing about augmented triads. Any two augmented triads you put together create a scale, a different symmetric scale. Meaning, let's say I'm taking G augmented and A augmented, right? That's a whole tone scale. Now, if I'm playing it over, let's say, a G7, so if you think about it, the two applications that I talked about, meaning F augmented relating to like a G bluesy sound, and then G augmented relating to like just G as a 5 chord, are put on top of each other. So this is the bluesy, this is the dominant. Bluesy, dominant, right? So it's pretty cool. Now, the other use of whole tone that's more surprising is how it relates to minor chords. Let's say I'm trying to use this D minor major 7, I said, by using A augmented on top of it. But now let's talk about that other sound, the B augmented, which is also G augmented, that gives me that weird mode of melodic minor. When I put both of these together, what I really get is this whole tone scale that is mismatched. It doesn't have a D, but it fits over D minor almost like melodic minor, but it has a flat 2. Look at it. If I have C sharp, that's my 7. E flat is my flat 2. F is my flat 3. G is my 4. E is my 5. And then B is my 6. So I have this sound on the D minor. Listen to that in context, like. It doesn't sound that out on the minor chord. It's pretty cool. Also, if you use that scale, you can play on the 2-5 and a 2-5-1 using one scale. G whole tone fits the D minor and the G7, right? So 2, 5, 1. All right, so that's how you make a whole tone scale from two augmented triads that are a whole step apart. But what if they're a half step apart? Well, then I have the augmented scale. If I take, let's say, A augmented and G sharp augmented, here's the scale I get. It has two modes. It's symmetric. The half steps in major thirds and the minor thirds and major thirds. Now, if I take 3 augmented triads and put them a half step apart, I get Messiaen Mode 3, which is the famous Allen Holdsworth nonsense scale, right? You get. A lot of people are obsessed with that sound. I still don't like it, but who am I to judge? In any case, augmented is a deep subject. It has lots of caveats, lots of applications. It's super interesting, and we break it down on our Patreon. There's so many lessons about augmented in our Patreon. Join us there. Join the family. Also, click subscribe, like, comment below, and I'll see you next time.